Story time on how I found out that I was a missing person, submitted by Johnson. First and foremost, my name is not Johnson, but my friends do call me Jay. And my life was relatively normal. I grew up in a single parent household with my father, and he always supported me in anything that I did, whether it be sports, my schoolwork and my grades, my personal life, you name it. But I never really knew much about my mother. It was never something that we talked about. And if we did talk about it, all he would really tell me is that she didn't want me. Naturally, as a child, this broke my heart, but there wasn't really much I could do about it, so I moved on. And I vowed that the past would never stop me from pursuing the future that I wanted. So when I applied to college, my father was completely supportive. He even offered to help me with the paperwork. But me being me, I wanted to do it on my own. So I submitted a few applications, but I started to get frustrated when all of my applications bounced back to me without any real reason of why my applications weren't acceptable. So I did what any high school student would do. I went to my school counselor, hoping that she could at least walk me through the application process so that I could get it submitted. After weeks of looking over everything, we finally figured out the problem. Turns out my social security number didn't match the rest of my information. I told my counselor that I would ask my father and see if he could provide us with the correct information, but she told me to allow her to do some more digging while I helped. And you'll never guess what we found out. But as you could have guessed, my counselor and I ended up finding a missing persons flyer from 2002, which showed a 5-year-old boy who had been missing for 13 years. I didn't believe it had anything to do with me at first, until they showed an aged progression of what the boy would look like in the future. I shit bricks when I realized it looked just like me. You'd think at this point I was sold on the matter. I was in complete denial until I realized that not only did the details match my own, but after finding the case in the news, I watched the broadcast with my counselor and it showed a man who they believed was responsible for taking me, and he looked like a younger version of my father. At this point, I wasn't interested in going home. Instead, I stayed with my counselor in her office doing more research. Since it was a heavily broadcasted case back then, it didn't take long to find out the big secret. Not only was I a missing kid, but I found out that my mother never stopped looking for me. The story was, she was 19 and in college when she had me. My father was not only several years older than my mother, but I found out that his name was of course not his real name. He was in his mid-30s and lived close to my mom. They were in a relationship for a while, but it was clear that my mother was pulling away from him. When I was 5, she needed to run some errands, so she dropped me off with him to babysit. But instead of babysitting, he withdrew all of his money, packed up some of my clothes and belongings, and took off. My mother was horrified, and she did the only thing that she could think to do. She went to the police. In filing her report, they wasted no time looking for him. But every lead they checked out fell through, and when they asked her what reason he would have to take me, you'll never believe what it was. Turns out, even the babysitting story was incorrect. Sometime between the ages of 3 and 5, my father went against a court order and took me away from my mother. When they contacted him and ordered him to return me to my mom, that's when he took off. He changed my name and my social security number and did something similar for himself. I had no idea, and after learning this, I can't say that I was angry with my father, but my main concern at the time was wanting to have all my information corrected for school and my records to show my true identity so that I could focus on my future. I also didn't want my father to get in trouble. It seemed silly, but at the end of the day, he was still my father. Later, he was arrested and charged with several accounts of kidnapping, tampering with records, and forgery. When my mom finally learned the truth, she was overjoyed and proceeded to attend the hearing for my father. Once there, this entire truth came out. My father threatened to take me away from my mother if ever they broke up, and he followed through with this and proceeded to build a lie around me for all these years. I'm sharing my story because I want you all to know how easy it is for a child to be taken and manipulated. Please be watchful and aware, and always know that if something like this does happen, always keep out hope and never stop searching, even when it seems hopeless. Even though Johnson submitted an alias when submitting the story, he followed up to say that in order to spread awareness, he did not mind you looking up his case by simply Googling his name, Julian Hernandez. If you would like to learn more about his story, please feel free to look him up. In the meantime, how do you guys feel about the story today? And are you guys interested in hearing more true crime stories or personal stories from followers? Let me know. The comments are open and I look forward to hearing from you all. Until next time!